Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. The cat always comes back, doesn't it? Today in the rLounge, the only thing OP is raising is a glass to toast her newfound freedom. Husband ghosted for 2 years. Shows up asking for help raising his child. Little does he know what I got. It's been a wild month, and I don't even know how to start unpacking all of this. I suppose the beginning is a good place as any. It all started 2 years back. My husband of 6 years, Dan, vanished from our life without a trace. Just like that. One random Tuesday afternoon, he was gone. No note, no fight, no hint that he was about to vanish into thin air. One day we were a family, and the next day he was gone. I'm still haunted by that time. It was so shattering I didn't know what to do. And the worst part was, I had no clue what had happened. I came back home from work, made dinner, and did my usual chores, waiting for him to arrive. I called him, but all his calls went to voicemail. The texts were undelivered. His last seen on social media was 12 hours ago. I was in a panic mode. I called his work and got to know he didn't show up that day. I called his friends and relatives, but no one had any clue about his whereabouts. I was petrified, but I gave myself with a false hope that maybe his phone was dead and he would be back by the night or the next morning. That morning never came. My parents and his came over to support me because I was so miserable. I had a 5-year-old daughter. I had no clue how to hold up myself. After waiting for a day, we lodged a missing complaint, and the cops showed us the images of the accident victim of the last 48 hours. Still no clue about him. Then 2 to 3 days later, I got a call from the cops. They found a dead body of a man from an abandoned windmill. It was an unclaimed body, and the physique matched with Dan's description. The face was slightly disfigured due to rotting, and they called me to identify if it was Dan. It still gives me shivers whenever I think about that day. My parents drove me to the morgue, and I could only remember how hard I was praying that I don't get to his dead body. My prayer was answered, and it wasn't Dan. Those days were so hard for me, and I almost neglected my child. I was madly searching for Dan. Gladly, my parents pitched in to take care of her. From relentlessly posting on social media, urging everyone to contact me if they find a trace of Dan, either online or anywhere else, to printing a missing poster of Dan, pasting and distributing across all corners of the town, I did everything. His parents also ran corners to search for him. They contacted all the distant relatives from different corners of the country to see if Dan contacted them. They reached out to everyone, from his school friend to his neighbor, but still no clue. My mind was racing with all sorts of negative thoughts. What if he got into an accident? What if he died, or was abducted, or I don't know, fell victim to a crime? Abandoning me was the last thing that crossed my mind. You know when these sorts of things happen, though people sympathize with you on your face, but at your back, they sort of question your behavior. I often heard people saying, God knows what triggered him to take such a drastic step, or you never know what happened between them. Though none of these came from my close ones or Dan's parents. No matter who said these, but these sorts of comments pushed me into self-sabotaging mode. I started questioning my sanity and repeatedly played all the conversations I had with Dan on his last days of stay with me, but I had no clue what triggered him. We didn't even have a fight for a long time. As days passed into months, I lost all hope. Eventually, I swallowed the bitter pill. Dan wasn't coming back. I tried to hold everything together for my daughter's sake, but internally, I was unraveling. I went back to work. My company was kind to grant me 2 months leave, but after that I got an ultimatum, either join or quit. Quitting wasn't a choice because now I was a single parent of a 5-year-old baby. Soon I had to come out of my denial mode and accept my reality. It was hard. Life moves on whether you're ready for it or not, and I had my daughter to think about. I had to be her rock when I felt like I was sinking. The money in our joint account was untouched, but I realized I have to really work hard if I want to give a good life to my daughter. I threw myself into work and being the best mom I could be. We moved to a smaller house because it was too big for 2 of us, and the memories of Dan haunted me there. My daughter missed her dad. There was no hiding that, but she's a resilient kid, and soon she learned to live without him. There were nights when she used to wake up from my cries, and she would console me, saying, Mom, I'm here with you. I'm never going to leave you like Dad did. As days passed, we even started to talk about him less and less. It hurt too much to dwell in the past, and I needed to believe that we could be happy, just the 2 of us. Then, about a year ago, Dan's parents gave me a surprise. I shared a cordial relationship with them before Dan's disappearance, and when that incident happened, they were nothing but supportive. They stood rock solid with me. They visited me time to time to check up on us, but this visit, it felt something different. They were heartbroken like me, but there was more. They told me they had sold off some of their assets, including their ancestral property, and they wanted me to have the money to raise my daughter. They were in tears, saying this was the least they could do for us. It made me tear up too. Dan was their only son, and God knows how they were holding up at this age. I didn't want to take it at first, and said they should save it for their future given that their son won't be around in their old age. But they insisted. They said that they have insurance money and savings which would outlive them. I still didn't feel right to accept it, but I was struggling financially, and my baby's future was my priority. I accepted it more for her than for me. That money changed our lives. I was able to buy a house, put away savings for her college, and finally breathe without worrying if we'd make rent that month. It gave us security, and I would be forever grateful to them. They even told me to consider dating and remarry, but I still wasn't ready for it. Then, a month ago, my world was flipped upside down once again. I was getting ready for work when I heard a knock on the door. I answered it, and there he was, Dan. I hugged him as tightly as I could. I started crying and kissing him. He was saying something, but I didn't hear. I just kept crying and asking him, "Are you all right? Are you hurt? Where did you go? What happened to you?" And that's when I saw a stroller with a baby in it. I couldn't even process it at first. I looked at Dan with terrified eyes and he said, "I'm sorry. Please hear me out. It all happened so fast. I got scared." My body reacted before my brain did, and I shrugged off his hand and slammed the door in his face. But he didn't leave. He kept knocking, pleading for me to open it and hear him out. I eventually opened the door, and this time he was holding the baby in his arms. I remember staring at that child and then back at Dan, unable to comprehend the situation. He started talking fast, like he needed to get everything out before I had the chance to throw him out again. He told me he had an affair with his assistant. The affair continued for 2 years, after which he knocked her up. She threatened to expose him if he didn't leave me and marry her. He was spineless to admit the truth to me or divorce me, so he chose the easier path, to vanish. They made a plan to leave the country and move to her native island. She left the job 2 months before and moved back first. Later, one day, Dan also fled the country, abandoning his life, his marriage, and worst of all, our daughter. I stood there, speechless, as he went on about how it had all been a mistake, that his mistress soon realized that she didn't want him or the baby. On the first birthday of the baby, she'd run off, leaving him with their son. Her family and relatives had no clue where she went. In fact, they all ganged up against Dan that he was the reason behind her missing. They were about to report him to the authorities and suspected him behind her sudden disappearance, but before that, he had somehow escaped from that country with his son. Now he had no one to help him raise this child, and that's why he was on my door. God knows how he got the address of my new house. I lost it. All the pain, anger, and betrayal I'd been holding back for 2 years came rushing out in a flood. I screamed at him to get out, to leave us alone, and to never come back. I told him I didn't care what had happened between him and that whore, or that he had a motherless son now. That wasn't my problem. He was not part of my family anymore, and neither was that child. I slammed the door at him, and he almost missed getting punched by the door. He still stood at the door, crying and pleading with me to forgive him. He had the audacity to say, "This is our chance to have the family you always wanted. 2 kids, a girl and a boy." It's true, I wanted 2 kids, but that child is not mine, and I don't want to accept him. After he was done pleading, he started gaslighting me. "How could you be so hateful towards an innocent soul? What has he done to you? You claim to be a pious and religious woman, and this is what you do to an innocent child? You're punishing him for his parents' mistakes?" He's such a manipulative dog, I tell you. No, I didn't accept him or his son, but his words and the child's innocent cry did break my heart. However, I still didn't lose my resolve and yelled at him to get out, or else I'd call the cops and sue him for negligence and abandonment of my daughter. He swiftly left after that. I immediately called up his parents to give him the heads up. We all knew that after I chased him away, he would reach out to his parents, and that's what happened. Dan went crawling back to his parents. He apologized to them, spinning the same sob story, begging for their support. But his parents, God bless them, were done. They didn't buy into his apologies, not after everything he'd done. They wanted nothing to do with him. That's when things got really interesting. Dan is desperate and broke. He asked them for his share of the family inheritance. Dan's grandfather left ancestral properties, the ones they'd sold to give me that sum of money. Dan was looking forward for his inheritance so that he could rebuild his life. When his parents told him the truth that they gave the money to me for my daughter's future, he freaked out. He lost his crap that how could they be such a fool to hand over the inheritance to me? He asked them to take back the money from me, but they refused. They said the money is given to the rightful heir, which was my daughter. Having lost the battle there, he came pounding on my door again, demanding that I give the money back to him. Initially, I refused him, saying it was his parents who gave it to me for my daughter's future, and I'm not going to return it. But now, he has started playing mind games, and he's accusing me of manipulating his parents and using my daughter to exploit his parents financially. I'm a person of self-respect, and I cannot take these allegations. I want to throw that money at his effing face and shut him away. But then I do a reality check that securing my daughter's future is more important than proving myself to be a saint. What do you guys think is the best thing to do? The fact that he's trying to manipulate the situation and turn it around on you is really frustrating. You have every right to stand your ground and not feel guilty about accepting the support from his parents for your daughter. It sounds like they made that choice knowing the circumstances, and it's not your fault he made such poor decisions. If I were you, I'd focus on keeping the lines of communication open with Dan's parents. They seem to have your daughter's best interests at heart, and having their support can be invaluable. As for Dan, it might be best to set firm boundaries and make it clear that you won't be entertaining any of his claims. Update 1. Hello all. You guys are right. I was overthinking. His parents gave the money on their own wish. I didn't ask them for it. I know Dan and some others won't believe it, but it doesn't change the truth. And I should be least concerned about what Dan thinks of me or what he has been going through. What he did was a grave sin, and he deserved what he's been going through. Can you imagine? The audacity. He abandoned us for years and then showed up with a baby from an affair and asked me to raise him as my own. The worst? He claimed the money that his parents gave me to ensure our daughter's future. He should be proud that his parents took responsibility for Emma in his absence, but all he cared about was himself. Yes, a lot of you commented about why didn't I sue him for abandonment. Well, guys, before he showed up, we didn't even know that he was alive. He was still on the missing persons list, and when he refused, the moment was so vulnerable for me that I could barely think straight. Also, I don't want to get into a court case mess. I have a full-time job and a daughter to take care of. His parents have already given me what essentially was his, so I'm good. All I want now is to protect my mental health. However, the next time he came to my door asking for his inheritance money, instead of feeling guilty about it, I charged him. I haven't stolen anything or manipulated anyone. His parents stepped up to fulfill his responsibilities. I just threatened to call the cops and get him arrested. It was the last time he showed up at my door. Thank God for that. My threats didn't deter him from exploiting his parents. Having lost all hope in getting back the money from me, he requested his parents to let him live with them for some time until he put his life together. His parents had to agree because of the baby. After all, they're his grandparents, whether they like it or not. They're good people, even though I wish they'd just cut him off entirely. For a month, Dan and the baby stayed with them, while he half-heartedly tried to find work or figure out his next move. But surprise, surprise, after about a month, Dan vanished again. He just dropped a letter from his parents, which basically said, "Since you guys gave up my inheritance for Emma's, my daughter, future, the upbringing of my boy is on you." It was like history repeating itself, except this time, it was his parents left holding the bag. They were devastated, not just by his disappearance, but by the responsibility of raising a child they never expected or wanted to care for. I can tell you how distraught his parents were. His father is 70 plus and his mother almost 65. They were howling like a baby when they broke the news to me. They are growing old and weak, and in this condition, how could they take care of a year-old baby, both physically and financially? They did their best to track him down, but as usual, no luck. He has mastered the game of ghosting, I guess. I went to meet them once. That was the first time I saw that boy properly. I didn't feel any hatred for that little being. In fact, I felt pity. He was left feeling unwanted by everyone. God knows how Dan's parents would raise him. The poor soul is suffering because of his parents' decision. He made his choices, and it's not your fault he's facing the consequences. Charging him when he asked for his inheritance was a bold move. It's empowering that you stood your ground and didn't let him manipulate the situation further. Your priority should always be your daughter and your own mental health, and it sounds like you're doing a great job focusing on that. As for his parents, it's heartbreaking to see them caught in the middle, especially at their age. Update 2. They say you can fool once, but not always. When Dan disappeared the first time, he left us hanging with millions of thoughts. The primary one was the feeling of concern. We all got worried for his safety, and when he did it twice, we exactly knew what he did. Like I said, his parents had a hard time raising his son, so they took the help of the social groups and circulated the boy's picture to search for his mother in her resident country. We had a gut feeling she was there, and it turned out to be true. After 2 to 3 months of circulating the messages across all platforms and social groups, Dan's mistress showed up to take her son back. One more thing came out. Dan never got married to her because, as per their island rule, one cannot marry during pregnancy. After she abandoned her son with Dan, she had apparently cleaned up her act and had settled down somewhere new, far away from Dan and their chaotic past. But when she got the news that Dan had left her son at his parents' mercy, she came back for him, finally. But she wasn't just there to collect the child. She was there to put Dan in serious trouble. She was furious that he had abandoned their son. I don't know how her anger was justified when she was the first one to abandon the child with an irresponsible man. A man who ghosted his wife and daughter should never be trusted. Anyway, she filed a lawsuit against Dan for neglect and abandonment, and word has it, Dan's facing some serious legal repercussions now. I can't say I'm surprised. Honestly, he deserves everything that's coming to him. Since Dan had fled the responsibility of raising their child, the legal system wasn't about to go easy on him. Between the lawsuit and the mess he made of his life, he was facing serious legal consequences. And this time, the cops were able to nab him down. From what his parents told me later, after they had managed to get updates through his lawyer, Dan was charged with child abandonment and neglect. The lawsuit from his mistress wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It came with financial penalties, and he was ordered to pay a hefty amount in child support. It wasn't just the civil case that bit him in the end. The authorities were involved as well. He was facing charges of abandoning his son and failing to meet even the basic requirements of parenthood. These types of legal issues carry severe consequences, especially where the court sees a pattern of neglect. Given that Dan had already burned through his savings and no longer had the support of his parents, who were done with him, his financial situation was in ruins. There was no inheritance to fall back on, and after the court hearings, he couldn't even find a stable job. The mounting legal fees, combined with the child support payments he now owed, sent him spiraling into debt. As for me and my daughter, we're doing just fine. My daughter doesn't even want to see her dad. She has seen me crying all night, and then her father showing up at the door and calling me names for accepting the money. She's actually terrified of him. I've promised her I won't let him come near us again. She has adjusted to life without her father, and she's thriving. I'm proud of the life I've built for us. I won't let him or his drama drag us down again. Sometimes I think about the little boy, Dan's son. I think about how he was abandoned, and not once, but twice, by the people who were supposed to protect him. As for Dan, I don't care where he ends up, jail, a deadbeat dad, or lost somewhere far away. He's not my problem anymore. Turns out, disappearing was the best thing he ever did for us. Just yesterday, I got to know from someone that Dan had fled the country again. This time, not out of a panic over an affair, but to escape his legal responsibilities. Some say he went to avoid jail time, skipping out before things got worse. I can't confirm it for sure, but no one's seen or heard from him since the court hearings. His parents haven't spoken to him in months, and his mistress is following up with the cops to find his whereabouts. In a way, Dan became the ghost he always was, vanishing without a trace just like before, but now no one's really looking for him. His parents moved on, and I certainly have no interest in his whereabouts. My daughter has a much better life without him, and honestly, so do I. Whatever happens to him next, that's not my problem. Dan's made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. It's empowering that you've reached a point where you can genuinely say he's no longer your concern. You've moved on, and it sounds like you're building a fulfilling life for yourself and your daughter, which is what truly matters. Keep prioritizing your happiness and that of your daughter, and know that you've done everything right by her. Here's to a brighter future for both of you, OP. What do you think? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon. Oh, and please put your chair back where you found it.